When we talk about this visit and what the goals were for this, we mentioned about strengthening relationships between Canadians and Ukrainians in their time of need right now. Would you also agree with me that one of the goals out of this was to be successful would be that there would not be any opportunity for the Russians in their typical misinformation and disinformation campaigns to have something they would latch onto to try to distract from the visit and take away from its success? Would you agree that not providing Russian misinformation campaigns with fodder be a goal to deem this trip successful?
It's more a policy question, but I think we can all agree that not providing Russia with material for disinformation is always a goal for every visit.
Agreed. And sadly, that's what happened out of this international embarrassment back in September. We talk about the overarching goals of what happened, and I think between what was covered in the media, what Canadians and people around the world saw was exactly this incident, and we're trying to figure out how it could be avoided, should have been avoided, and could be avoided in the future. So one of the things, Ms. Kennedy, about vetting, maybe this is an opportunity for lessons learned about what we've learned from past mistakes perhaps the Liberal government has made. Can you confirm that whenever visits to Canada by a foreign head of state or dignitary or diplomatic mission come, you work on the protocol or events or lists and so forth, but the other way around, when the Prime Minister travels around the world and brings guests with him, do you have a process or do you have a role in preparing those itineraries and agendas and logistics?
Madam Chair, just to confirm the question, it's about the Prime Minister's outgoing visits where he's, well, for both incoming and outgoing visits, we provide the Prime Minister with the appropriate policy support. We work closely with Global Affairs to develop a recommendation to undertake the visit to begin with. When we go through that process, we look at how our foreign policy objectives could be advanced, but also tangible outcomes that could be derived from such an engagement. From time to time, depending on the time constraints, we do provide some ideas for program elements that could be considered in the context of an outgoing visit.
So let me use the example of the Prime Minister's trip to India a few years ago in his first term in office. We can recall that trip being a disaster diplomatically for many reasons, one of which is that it turned out, we found out afterwards, that the Prime Minister's office invited a known terrorist to be on as part of the Canadian delegation that visited India. Is that correct, that happened brutal. Back in the Prime Minister's first term in office?
I was not in my current position at that time.
Well, I can confirm that that did happen. And what I would say is, in terms of the lessons learned, at that point, the importance of guest lists, who the Prime Minister invites either to attend an event when foreign dignitaries are visiting Canada and having official events in Office of the Protocol domestically, but then also internationally we found out the international embarrassment that was caused by not vetting guests properly when there are diplomatic missions and international relationship building around the world. So I asked Ms. Kennedy, in your work and any of the things leading up to this visit in the office and the work that you do, from that visit in 2017 where a terrorist was found to be on the Prime Minister's guest list for an official visit to India at that point.
Point of order.
I was actually just going to let Mr. Duncan finish his train of thought because I think it's very disrespectful. When I have stated why we are here today, you have challenged the chair, we've had a vote, and then you're choosing to not only ask questions but answer them for the witnesses. Point of order, Mrs. Romanato.
Yes, Madam Chair, I was just about to say that we've already established that the purpose of this meeting is to discuss what happens in the House. As you said, that was challenged, voted down. We have witnesses before us to discuss what happens in the House, and I'd like us to remain on that subject. Thank you.
Point of order, Chair.
Mrs. Wingenthal.
Thank you, Chair. I think the most important thing I would see that we're supposed to do here today is to ensure that this type of thing doesn't happen and embarrass our Prime Minister over and over again, whether it's whether it's due to circumstances within his office or somewhere else. We're talking about Canada's reputation and our Prime Minister's reputation, and the two are linked because we're talking about Canadians
Thank you. So
who
I think
traveled
next
with
time,
the Prime Minister
Mrs.
or
Wagenthal,
were represented
thank
in
you.
the House.
You've made your point. I don't think it's actually a point of order. I would encourage you perhaps
Yes, it
next
is. It's a
time
point of
when
order on relevance.
negotiations are being passed as to what the committee will be doing. And as somebody, I know you weren't here, but perhaps they have briefed you. The wording is basically exactly what was offered by the Conservative Party. The witnesses who were invited are basically exactly, and there was not, it was not a
Chair.
smooth process as to what was
Thank you,
passed in this
Chair.
committee. So members are very well aware as to what took
I
place here.
understand the motion
We're not having
and
a
how
back and forth.
particular
Thank
it is,
you.
but it requires
I'm going to go
feedback
back
from
to
other dynamics to make
Mr.
sure
Duncan,
that is done.
reminding you as to the purpose of the meeting.
I have, another point and I have a point of order.
Holy smokes.
Mr. Gerson, you have a point of order?
Now what does he want?
Going to follow up on that, but no need.
Sorry, I didn't even hear you. Thank
you
you.
did, yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad Mr. Patzer is concerned about your points of order. Thank you for all this assistance I'm getting here today. Mr. Duncan.
My point of order to say about the continued reference to the motion that was passed by PROC was on November 21st. I had attempted and trying to attempt unsuccessfully and being blocked from talking about an access to information request that was provided in the media on February the 5th. So when we passed this motion on November 21st, the information was not revealed. I'm trying to raise new information that is very relevant to the individual named in this study that we are looking at and being refused to. So if we're going to reference this November 21st date by PROC, we should also acknowledge that new information has come since that motion was passed in November 21st, and I have every right to be able to raise that and ask questions.
Mr. Gerritsen?
On that point of order, I would respectfully disagree. Mr. Duncan doesn't have the right to do what Mr. Duncan has the right to do is to keep within the scope of this motion. He certainly had the right to try to amend the study. The Conservatives could have come forward and said, we would like to now broaden the scope of this study, and the committee could have debated that before inviting witnesses. But when we invite witnesses here who think that the meeting and the study is about one thing and then try to introduce new topics when they arrive, it's unfair to the witnesses. So you've ruled on this many times. You keep getting pushback from Mr. Duncan on this. He's not respecting your role as a chair, Madam Speaker. I would strongly encourage you to ask him to come to order, or perhaps he would not like to participate in the meeting if he's not capable of staying within the rules that you have very clearly laid out.
It's a good day, right? We're on this side of the earth. It's a good day. Okay. I am
And as
going
another
to ask,
point of order,
do we really have to?
Yeah, another point
Okay,
of order.
yes.
Mr. Duncan should tread lightly on the fact that that November 21st meeting was actually in camera. So he might want to be careful about what he says in terms of that particular meeting and what may have or may have not happened within it.
So I'm going to just bring us back, and I offered you a 5-minute break earlier, and it feels like perhaps we need more than a 5-minute break. I am going to remind us as to why we're here today. I am going to remind us, to Mr. Duncan's point of order, that the dates and timelines that were provided within it were satisfied. So the work that the clerk and myself and we do on this side of the room had been satisfied. If there was concerns at that time, they should have been raised at that time. November was quite a bit of time ago. It's actually last year. So right now, we have a little bit more time with Ms. Kennedy, and then we've got a lot more time with Mr. Carrier and Ms. Hudson. And so I'm going to ask you, Mr. Duncan, to complete your time within the scope of the study.
I'll just do a quick point of order to Mr. Gerritsen, but just so there's no, issues with my conduct here, the minutes are public here of what happened. The minutes are published, so I'm not disclosing anything. Look at the minutes.
When we were
The motion that was passed
Yes.
was
Motion
in the
Okay,
minutes.
okay, gentlemen, what's going on here today?
A good question.
Okay,
Question.
so let's stay focused.
Great
We
question.
have company who has joined us at PROC. People love coming to Procedure and House Affairs. We love when guests come, as you can tell. And so we're going to stay focused on the scope of the study. And Mr. Duncan has 1 minute and 10 seconds left. So please complete your round, Mr. Duncan.
So I was not able to raise information about Mr. Hunka and things and their relationship and their knowledge of Mr. Hunka through the protocol office and the PCO and PMO in the first round. And now when I'm about to ask my second question, get called a point of order again, but I'm going to ask the question to Ms. Kennedy. There was an international embarrassment with the Prime Minister's visit to India by not properly vetting a guest list where a terrorist was brought along to the Prime Minister on that diplomatic visit, which was a disaster for that entire trip and many purposes. What lessons were learned and incorporated into this visit where yet again, guests lists that were provided by the PMO, PCO were not properly vetted and created an international embarrassment? What was done between that India incident and this one to try to avoid this from happening in PCO in the Prime Minister's office? Mr. Kerr, if you want to address that as well, I'd be happy. What new steps have taken since that 2017 incident with a guest list that has come and been tried to be rectified since?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. With regards to the address in Parliament, PCO was not aware that this individual was going to be invited to the address to Parliament, nor was he going to be recognized there. We had no visibility on that. I would also add that given the need to respect the role of parliamentarians and the operations of the House of Commons, there was no other role for the Privy Council office in this situation.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I have no information on 2017. I was not in protocol or on the India desk. What I do know is that I think there are steps that can be taken to avoid another incident like this here at the House of Commons with the Speaker's office. And my understanding is that that procedure has been reviewed, and I'm pretty certain that the committee can find new recommendations to make sure that that doesn't happen again, because that's the incident that made the news, not the Toronto event.
It is. The commentary that's coming from the member is also very appropriate. So, thank you. Thank you.